I'm Caleb. This is my friend FJ Eric. If you've been wondering why the content's been so good recently, he's the reason. We'll link his channel up there. He drives an ambulance.
Thanks.
We are working on our wide-body Mercedes today, and it's time to get it ready for paint. And we're having like 2 warm days, maybe 3 warm days, so we have to paint it like now because I can't paint in the cold. So we are going to go through this thing, sand the whole thing down with 120, get it ready for primer, try to get it in primer today so that we can block it and sand it and paint it tomorrow. Not ambitious at all. We got this. All right, Eric.
Why are you yelling?
This is what we're gonna do. So we're just gonna knock everything down. We gotta make sure that this thing's not shiny at all so that the paint will actually stick to it. So we got 120 on these sanders, these orbital sanders. The only rule here is keep the sander flat and don't hit the edges. Anywhere where there's like a raise, like in the hood, don't touch them. We'll hand sand that stuff. And that's really it. We're gonna hit the whole thing. Once the whole thing's hit, it'll be ready for primer and we'll be good to go. All right, so Eric's done and I'm done as well, sort of. We've still got to do some hand sanding just to get all the edges and stuff. But before we do that, let's check out my side and then we'll check out Eric's side and I'll show you kind of what you want to look for if this is your first time sanding a car. Anytime I do this, I'm trying to get kind of a uniform color on the cars. That'll show you that you've gotten all of the clear coat off or at least scuffed down. Clear coat does not like paint. Your paint just won't stick to it very well. So you want to at least wait for that motorcycle to pass. So you want to at least make it all look dull like this. That way you know your primer, your paint, whatever you're spraying on top is going to actually stick. And you want it to be real uniform so you know it sticks everywhere. You don't have any flaking or chips. So this is pretty good. You can see, obviously I told him to stay away from these corners. That's because you can flatten these pretty easy with a machine sander. We'll probably just hand sand those. I may run over them with a machine. And when I say flatten, you won't feel it, but you'll see it later on. But it looks pretty good. We've got a little bit of splotchiness that I want to get rid of just to make sure everything's sanded all the way. This is probably okay, but you know, might as well be safe than sorry. We didn't touch the fenders with the 120 yet. We will get to that. But yeah, same here. This all is looking really good. We'll probably hit this a little bit longer just to get kind of these splotches that you see to go into one uniform color. That'll tell us that this is pretty flat and we're ready for primer. Overall, sanding with 2 people is way faster than sanding with 1 person, so we need to do that again. So what we're gonna do next is we'll come back with our hand sanders, our blocks, and really just our hands on some of this curved stuff, and just knock down the rest of the gloss off this car. And then we will be ready to take this thing over to my house where we'll tape it and prime it. All right, so you've got to clean the car before you paint it. That seems pretty obvious. You don't want dust in your paint, even your primer. You want the smoothest finish possible. But the issue with this is that water is the enemy of paint. You'd think dust would be the biggest enemy, but in my opinion, it's water. You get water in your lines, you get water in the paint from the ground or whatever, or if it comes flying out of the door jambs and into your paint, it's gonna mess up your day. It's very difficult to fix, especially in the clear coat stage, but even in primer. So what we're gonna do is clean this thing. A lot of people will wash them with like Dawn soap, which is a really good thing to do. It'll degrease the car, but you have to you really need to let it dry overnight for that, and we don't have that kind of time. So I'm gonna just take a damp rag. We're gonna wipe the whole car down. We'll go over it 2 times with the damp rag, and then we'll degrease it with an actual degreaser right before primer. So we'll know this thing is completely clean, no dust, no oil, no nothing, and it will hold, the primer will stick and hold really, really well.
A lot of work to this thing.
Yeah, so obviously this is not how the primer comes out of the gun. It needed still a lot of work. This primer that we're using is called a slick sand. It's like a super, super high build. So you can literally fill like pinholes with it and flatten everything out. So I sanded the whole thing for about 4 hours yesterday. Yo.
I'll go inside and you come inside.
Okay, let me hold you for just a second. Yeah, so we went over the whole thing yesterday with a block, and some 400 grit. So the parts that we've sanded, you can see are super smooth. And it's really important because anytime you paint, whatever you can feel, you're gonna be able to see. And if you get an imperfection underneath the paint, you're never gonna be able to fix it. If stuff falls in the paint like dirt or whatever, you get some orange peel on the surface, no big deal, you can wet sand and polish that out. But if it's underneath, then you will have it forever. And I learned that the hard way with a few paint jobs I did, where I sanded, but I didn't do what I think is the most important step. Come over here and I'll show you. And we're just gonna take this block. I'm using a really long one so that it's smoother across a longer distance. If you use a shorter block, you still might have some waves. The longer the block, the less wavy it's gonna be. And we're just gonna hit this. And I'll stop right there and you can see this kind of orange peel texture. Now, if I did not sand this back, or if I didn't go any further than that, you would see this in the paint. But I can see because there's still guide coat and because we have kind of these this orange peel texture, this is not actually smooth, but this up here is. So we're gonna keep sanding this until all of that black is gone. Well, it's kind of like a brownish color, like this stuff right here. Let me help you a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Here you go. Hold this side. No more black. All right, so after you've blocked the whole side, it'll look something like this. This side is super smooth and uniform. You'll notice these green and black spots. The black is where I've sanded through into the fiberglass underneath. The green is actually some glazing putty that's really, really thin and self-leveling, so it covers up like pinholes and stuff that you get when you do filler. If air gets in your filler, your fiberglass filler, whatever, it'll fill that in. And that's really great for fiberglass parts because you tend to get some air pockets. So we went ahead and did that and filled that in, sanded it down. Now this is all really smooth, but paint's a little bit translucent, especially light paint. So we're gonna be using silver as our base layer on this car, and it's a pretty easy color to see through. So what I don't want is for these spots to show through in our final paint job. If they do, they'll be there forever. So we're gonna hit it with some primer. That'll make everything the same color, and that way when we spray over everything, even if we do get a little bit of spot where maybe there's not as much coverage or full coverage, it won't be very noticeable because you won't have these spots underneath the paint. All right, we have got this thing back in the shop, and I'm really, really stoked about it. It's very clean, everything is gray, and it's been sanded down with 600 grit, so it should look really, really smooth. Like we showed you, we used guide coat to make sure everything was flat. I think this is going to be probably the best bodyworks car I've ever done, and likely the best painted. But there's one major issue. You hear the hissing over here beside me. It's a heater because it's cold today. We took a temperature reading with our infrared thermometer, and the building was 41 when we got in here. It's about 52 right now, which is decent, but it's still really cold for paint. So we've got this one heater running. We're going to cut it off before we start spraying because paint fumes will ignite. Before we do clear, though, we're going to have to really heat this building up because the worst paint job I've ever done was in a situation like this where it was really cold and I was trying to paint a car, and the clear coat will run like crazy if it's cold. So we're really going to have to work on getting it warm before we get to clear. But before we get to clear, we've got a surprise. We're actually painting this car more than one color. So the first step is going to be to base coat the whole thing. That's what we're going to do now. I've got a cough drop in, so does Eric. This is a trick for you guys that paint at home, maybe not at home. Respirators dry out the air. They're filtering the air, so they dry it out. It makes your throat hurt. If you use a cough drop while you spray, it fixes it. I learned that on a forum somewhere. So we got cough drops in, we've got the car clean, we've got our hoses routed and run, we've got our mixing stations set up, more prepared than I've ever been for a paint job, and I went ahead and cleaned this whole area and added a bunch of random lights everywhere. So hopefully we'll be able to see a little bit better than we have in the past, and this will just go a little bit Smooth. Alright, so this thing's been drying for about an hour, and honestly, it looks really, really good. We had some issues with the gun while we were painting, and we got them sorted out, so they didn't cause that much drama with the paint job, but one of the things I am really happy with is the bodywork. There's almost always an issue with bodywork, and I'm sure there's an issue with this bodywork too that we'll see when we get in the sun, but overall, it looks way better than anything we've done so far. So I am getting better at bodywork, which is super encouraging. Really, if you look at this car, you may be able to see it on camera, but flat color really shows imperfections. There's a lot of new cars coming out that you can special order with like a flat paint on it, and it's like a $5,000, sometimes $10,000 option. And I don't think what people understand is that as soon as that paint scratches, you're going to see it. And there's any imperfection over the years, like you're going to see it immediately. So there are some imperfections that I can see. I think the clear coat will kind of hide them. I don't know. We'll see. But we're not actually ready for clear coat yet. We have one more step, and it's a step I've never done, and I'm really nervous about it. Let me show you. Tape. I've never put tape on base coat. Now, the data sheet for this says that it can have tape on it in 45 minutes, and we've waited an hour because it's a little bit cooler out today, about 60 degrees in here, maybe like 55. So I'm going to test a section before we just go off and tape this thing. We wanted to make this paint a little bit wilder, and we're going to, and you guys will see that in just a couple minutes. It'll take us a couple hours. But first, we just got to make sure the tape's not going to pull paint off. So I want to go somewhere kind of discreet. Let's see. We'll go right here. And this is behind the grill normally, so it won't matter if we pull the paint off here. And it shouldn't pull off, but I don't know. I've never done this before. It's really nerve-wracking. Make sure that's pushed on there really good. Very clean. Awesome. I guess we're good. This thing is looking awesome, and for the first time doing multicolor base coat, I think we did pretty good. There's some taping mistakes that I made that led to some overspray that I had to get off, but it's not going to matter for the rest of the livery, and we'll get into that later. Overall, though, really cool. I'm a big fan of that thin, like fine line tape. That stuff worked wonders on the back of the car, and I think this thing's going to look absolutely insane. This is not the whole livery, this is just the part that we're doing in paint.
Well, this is embarrassing. We got ahead of ourselves and did not film anything of the car after clear coat. We had planned on doing it, got carried away, went ahead and started into the livery, and so I don't have any video of the car clear coated, but I do have pictures, so sorry for this kind of weird ending to a pretty epic video, but here's some pictures of the car with clear coat. Next week we will be doing the rest of the livery, and it's gonna look awesome.